If you missed it, the breaking news, Carolina Hurricanes signed forward Nikolaj Ehlers to a 6-year, $8.5 million a year deal. So $51 million total over 6 years. The release max actually just came through from the Carolina Hurricanes about 10 minutes ago or so, but we saw the news just before the show started. So everything has just been a little bit of a whirlwind, I guess you can say. He's netted 20-plus goals in 8 out of 10 years in the NHL. 8 out of 10 seasons, he's netted 20-plus goals. That is consistent scoring, again, that this team has not had. This team has continued to search for and try and find a top 6 forward that can score on a consistent basis. They tried it with Jake Gensel. They tried it with Mikko Rantanen. Now, they weren't able to re-sign Jake Gensel because they were just in a penny pinch a couple of years ago because you didn't know about Jack Drury and his restricted free agency and arbitration. You didn't know potentially with arbitration and restricted free agency with Martin Necas. You also had a restricted free agent in Seth Jarvis. You were trying to work all those things on a super tight cap crunch. You didn't know exactly what you were going to be able to give Jake Gensel. So unfortunately, you lost out on Gensel. They tried this past season with Mikko Rantanen. We all know that story. But it led us eventually to this. Again, we're Nikolaj Ehlers, again, part of the Carolina Hurricanes. 6 years, $51 million a year for Nikolaj Ehlers, coming over from the Winnipeg Jets, which has been a really good team, by the way. Winnipeg Jets were the President's Trophy champions last year, top team in the regular season. They got to the second round of the playoffs. They lost to the Dallas Stars. Coming over from a pretty good team that consistently wins. Now, the question is going forward, now that you do have Nikolaj Ehlers, again, as part of the free agent frenzy presented by John Heister, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep in Lillington. The question is going forward now, what's next? What's next for this team? So $8.5 million a year. You actually look at the salary cap that is now available for the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, according to Puckpedia, which is one of the websites out there that covers the NHL, or at least gives a lot of the breakdown in terms of player contracts, how much each player has left on their contract in terms of how many years, the average annual value, the salary cap available, all those kinds of things. The Carolina Hurricanes, according to Puckpedia, have about $10.6 million in salary cap available. But factoring into that salary cap is also some players like Bradley Nadeau, who's on an entry-level contract, as well as a guy like Tyson Jost, on an entry-level, who's on a two-way contract, players that you can easily drop down. So, I mean, you're really more looking like just over $11.5 million, or roughly around $11.5 million in salary cap that's still available. Now, with Nikolaj Ehlers coming into the fold, if he's on a top line, let's say with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. By the way, Nikolaj Ehlers, Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis, that's a heck of a top line. On that quote-unquote second line, you put, let's say, Taylor Hall and Andrei Svechnikov as the wingers. Well, we've talked about consistently about this team needing a number 2 center. With Taylor Hall, let's say Andrei Svechnikov as your quote-unquote second pair of wingers, then you have Jordan Staal, Jordan Martinook with Logan Stankoven. And then where does that leave a guy like Jackson Blake? Because you still have Mark Jankowski, you have Eric Robinson that you signed, and you have William Carrier. Carrier has 5 years left on his contract. Well, where does that leave Jackson Blake? If Jackson Blake gets dropped down to your quote-unquote fourth line, well, then that's got to bump out either Eric Robinson or William Carrier. Now, obviously, you got to factor in you might have injuries and so forth, but not only is it going to bump out one of those guys, but also you have a young rookie by the name of Bradley Nadeau that's still in your farm system, who at 19 years old this past year in the American Hockey League put up 30-plus goals. Still developing into a complete game, but he has an NHL shot right away. Well, now because you've signed Nikolaj Ehlers, the way I view it is, if you wanted to trade a good young player for someone that could be a number 2 center, well, Jackson Blake now becomes easier to move because now you're essentially moving a guy that on your team is a fourth liner. That's a lot easier to move than someone who would have to potentially be a second or third line player. Now that he would be a fourth-line player in my eyes, he's a lot easier to move. So if you wanted to go get another top center that can be right there with Sebastian Aho, even if people want to say, well, Aho is really a 2C, fine, go get a number 1. If Sebastian Aho is my number 2 center, awesome. Great. I would love that. Because that means you got one hell of a guy to be your number 1. That's fine, too. Again, the name that's floated around a bunch, I've said it before, Tage Thompson will be a heck of a get. But if you're going to go after Buffalo and get Tage Thompson from Buffalo, the center who's 6'5", 6'6", skates really well, he's right-handed, strong, and can score. Yeah, those guys don't grow on trees. That's going to cost an arm and a leg and maybe a second leg in order to get them. So, yeah, you would have to include players that could play right now and young players that can develop and grow into being everyday NHL players if they're not already. So, to me, in my eyes, yes, there's still a problem at center. Trust me, I see the YouTube live chat and everything like that. There's still a problem at center on this team. Jesperi Kotkaniemi has not produced at the level that this team has desired. He just hasn't. But he's young, 24 years old. He's making less than $5 million a year. He doesn't have a no-trade clause on his contract. He doesn't until next season. Next season, he has a 10-team no-trade list next year. So it's a player that you can move to anywhere right now, which is a key part. But if you wanted to put together a package of players and picks to go get a top guy like a Tage Thompson, it's going to cost you a lot. And I'm going to say it's not going to be cheap. I mean, for people that are floating out there, give him Kotkaniemi, Jackson Blake, and a first for Tage Thompson. I'm sorry, if you're Buffalo, would you give up Tage Thompson for Kotkaniemi, Blake, and a first? I would not do that. If I'm Kevin Adams, the general manager in Buffalo, I ain't making that deal.
I'm hanging up the phone before you finish talking.
It's funny. Really, what do you want to talk about? Eric Stahl's doing great up here. He's doing a good job. I ain't making that move. If you want to take Tage Thompson from me, my best player in the face of my franchise, by the way, for Tage Thompson, a player that has 5 years left on his contract, a player that's 27 years old, so you're getting him for his prime years, and he's making like just over $7 million a year, it's going to take more than Kotkaniemi, Blake, and a first-round pick or 2 first-round picks. It's going to take way more than that. Now, it probably would include a Kotkaniemi, Blake, Nadeau. Would it be Andrei Svechnikov? Like, it might cost you that in order to move up to try and get him. It might cost you that, because if I'm going to give up an elite player, I have to be getting back someone that I could consider an elite player. And a lot of people are still going to look at Andrei Svechnikov and go, he's 25 years old, former second overall pick. He just had that 8-goal run there in the playoffs. That's a player that I will want in return. So to get someone like Tage Thompson, it's going to cost a boatload. For a guy like Dylan Larkin from the Detroit Red Wings, Detroit feels like, man, we're just like right there on the edge of making the playoffs. We're close. We're right there on the edge of making the playoffs. You think they're going to give up Dylan Larkin for Kotkaniemi, Bradley Nadeau, and 2 firsts? I'm not doing that if I'm Steve Yzerman in Detroit. I'm not. Not even close. If you want to get an elite player that's a top 2 center, you're going to have to potentially give up one of your own elite players in order to make that move. And again, that might be Andre. Because Andre is probably you're not giving up Seth Jarvis. I'm not giving up Seth Jarvis if I'm Eric Tulsky, unless Connor McDavid's coming back. If Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl's coming back, Jarvie, I love you, buddy. But there are very few players that I'd be willing to give up Jarvis for.
Yeah, especially at his contract, too. It's such a good value.
All things you have to take into consideration, too. But what player am I willing to part ways with? Now, if I trade Sebastian Aho, it's to then I still have a second center problem. All things you have to take into consideration when you're looking at these things. But yeah, I'm not giving up a guy like Seth Jarvis. Not happening. Not happening at all. You have to factor in what guys' contracts are and what people want. But what's your biggest trade chip in terms of elite player? Your two biggest trade chips are Seth Jarvis and Andrei Svechnikov and Alexander Nikishin. I ain't giving up Jarvis. I ain't giving up Nikishin. That's really it. Now, also, there's a caveat when it comes to Andrei Svechnikov. Andrei Svechnikov does have a modified no-trade clause as well. He has what they call a 10-team approved trade list. So he can give a list to the Carolina Hurricanes, or needs to give a list to the Carolina Hurricanes at the beginning of the year, which, basically a few days ago, beginning of the league year. Here are 10 teams that I approve trades to that you don't have to ask me about. So that limits what you can do. Now, you can always approach a player and say, hey, look, there's a trade out there on the table. We're thinking about making the move, but they're not on your list. Would you accept being part of a trade to go to another team? And the player would say, nope, not going to waive my no trade for that. And that's the player's right. Those are things you have to consider as well. This isn't playing general manager mode on EA Sports NHL 25, NHL 26. This isn't be a GM mode where you can just make these kinds of moves. There are real things in contracts and clauses that you have to take into consideration. Now, I've stated it. I love the idea, again, of a guy like Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson has a 5-team no-trade list. So he submits a list of 5 teams to the Buffalo Sabres saying, you can't trade me to these 5 teams. I don't know if Carolina's on that list. I doubt it would be if it's 5 teams. I'm probably not going to put Carolina on that list. But if you want to get those high-end guys, it's going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you a heck of a lot. But with the signing of Nikolai Ehlers on this team, again, if you missed the news, Nikolaj Ehlers, 6-year contract, $8.5 million a year. So $51 million total. Which, by the way, I like the term because he's 29 years old. I'm going to get him for still part of his prime years. And at $8.5 million a year, it doesn't hold you back from still making any of the moves that you want to do. You still got cap space in order to make these moves, and you got the salary cap bump that's going to take place next year as well. Like, you can still have money to make moves this season. You still have plenty of room to sign Alexander Nikishin to a long-term contract if you want to, or even a bridge deal. You have plenty of opportunity to do that next season as well. It doesn't hold you back from doing anything, and you have so many players that are under contract for not only just this year, but obviously next year, but even years beyond that. This deal doesn't hold you back from doing anything. You still have a lot of picks that you can use as part of a trade. You do have the young prospects. I just wonder, looking at the future of this team, is there room for Bradley Nadeau? Is there room for Jackson Blake now? Because once you sign a winger, there's the trickle-down effect. Young players that other teams might want to have that they think can develop, Canes have that, and it might cost you a couple of your better ones with Bradley Nadeau and Jackson Blake, and you might have to throw in Jesperi Kotkaniemi and some first and another high-end player. If you want to get high-end, you got to spend high-end. Plain and simple for this team. Plain and simple for this team. This team has been building prospects, like building its prospect pool and its draft pick pool. You have it to spend. You have it at your disposal and cap space. Even after the Keandre Miller trade a couple days ago that you used a first, a second, and a young prospect, you still have picks, prospects, and draft capital. And you just signed one of the best players in free agency. And you still have all these things at your disposal. In my eyes, this team isn't done. There's no way this team can be done. There's still holes out there, but this team right now is better than what it was June 30th.